In a battlefield, Ha kneels to ground as he is getting sick of himself. He is only alive just because he couldn't die. So he stands up and looks towards his unlived enemies, thinking the only reason he is alive, so that he could die. To make something good out of his life. He destroyed every enemy there is out of hatred. Ha had fought many wars courageously. His willingness to fight can be determined that he is willing to fight, even if the blade breaks down. He would use his teeth to defeat the enemy. His friend scolds him as he ran down to fight the monster, but he tells him it's okay, as this was the last monster to be defeated. He was a brave fighter as he didn't have the motive to fight to protect the humanity. He instructs Yuzhong not to go in front, at the front line. Yuzhong passes a comment if he can't fight with her being around, to which he clears that he is good. From the expression on his face, it is evident that he does not fight to finish human enemies. He only fights to resolve a problem before his death. All of this is like an endless madness. He heads out with his soldiers and sees the giant monster. An insider voice from him tells the monster that he is going to do everything in my power to finish him if that means his bones are crushed badly. Yuzhong, who is looking at this scene from a distance, covers her mouth out of terror, as how will they be able to defeat this huge monster? The monster starts attacking the guards, which infuriates Ha. So, he decides to run towards him to attack at the monster. Yuzhong, who is still standing far away, runs towards the monster, while calling out for Ha to save him. Sadly, Ha is injured, so he hides to take a breath. Yuzhong forbids Ha from standing up and places her hand right above his wound. Ha looks at his hand that is filled with his blood. Yuzhong tries to heal from him, but Ha knows that this is the moment he had been waiting for a long time. So he tells Yuzhong not to worry as this is the end. Yuzhong is in tears and scolds him for speaking something like that himself. Ha tries to calm Yuzhong by placing his hand above hers. He again tells her to stop as he is unsure if she has enough power to heal him. Emotional Yuzhong begs him to let her do the procedure, as she is sure that she will be able to heal him. He asks her to stop crying as he would get emotional if she would not stop. A part of Ha is happy to know that he does not have any emotional connection with anyone or any regrets except one, which is if he does, he would be leaving Yuzhong, his partner, alone. So he apologizes to her for mistreating her. Ha suddenly remembers his younger sibling Beck Lion, so she asks him to come back safe and sound for him as she likes her brother. Ha, who is being subtle, thanks her for all the love he has received from her. Yuzhong sits by his side as she cannot help him and sobs uncontrollably. She tells him that they are going to travel back to time in order to save him. The scene is moved to the time when Ha was a baby. A voice of his father can be seen asking how to wake up, while soft, kind voice of his mother is telling him not to wake up the baby. So both of them sits by the crib and watch him over. At the same time, Yuzhong is woken up. Most flower party is a type of place where people used to fight in order to die. Its leader is called Undead, as he is unable to die, while the other people in the group are called Berserker, as they have only one goal, that is kill as many monsters as possible. Ha is one of the 8 fighters to exist in the world called Black Dungeons. Among all, he is the person who managed to stay clear till now. This is the situation of Heart of Abyss. Back in the battlefield, tired Ha is seen to be walking with his sword dripping blood. In front of him are 2 magnificent monsters, but unbothered looks ready to kill them. So he starts to attack then. Turns out this was the exact place where 32-year-old Ha was killed. With his attacks, he was able to shed some of the monster blood, but the monster surprises him by biting him. Ha using this opportunity of close counter cuts off monster's hand. The monster is furious and in pain screams. Ha doesn't step back and continues his attacks. For a brief moment, the monster gets the chance to overpower him. So he pushes back and he falls down to a distance. Ha quickly gets up and again tries to take control. The monster screams because of the pain. Using the last bit of strength in him, Ha strikes again and he was able to unalive the monsters. Ha takes a sigh of relief. When he looks back, he horrified to find out every soldier that tried to fight is dead. Angry Ha decides to walk towards the boss places because after witnessing this, there is only thing he wants to do, that is to kill the master himself. Ha reaches to the door and walks straight in. When he looks around, he can't see anything because of the darkness, but something inside of him tells him that the boss is here somewhere. In that moment, a light starts to emerge from the area. Turns out the light was the eyes of the ruler of Abyss. The sudden force that pushed the ruler to open eyes throws him backwards. Ha is now against the wall, screaming in pain. It was not long before Ha realizes that he will die here, as for people of his age, it is impossible to defeat the ruler of Abyss. To comfort himself, he remembers he had fought monsters alone, as he was able to enter in the palace of ruler of Abyss, which no one has done before. Suddenly, he hears a voice that tells him to keep going. It was no one other than Yuzhong. He is a bit surprised to see her alive. While she is crying, she tries to heal him. She uses her magic spell on his wound. Eun-ha advises her to run away for her life as she is focused on the spell. Yu-joing tells him to be quiet as she is going to do everything in her power to save him. She quickly realizes that Eun-ha wounds are very deep and it is a miracle that he's alive. She thinks she is the reason behind this miracle, so she with determination tries harder to save his life. Eun-ha repeats his dying words that this is his end, and he has no regrets except leaving his partner behind. Yu-joing apologizes for not being able to save him. He thanks his sister Beak Lion for liking a person like him. That Yu-joing realizes she is losing Eun-ha, so she yells that she will do everything that's possible to save him, including going back in time. A bright yellow light shines behind Eun-ha as she says she will save him. And after a sudden eruption of golden rays, he is taken back to his childhood. To the time he was a baby, and his parents are playing with him as he watches them from his crib. His parents talks to baby Eun-ha as he grabs his mother's finger. This was a wholesome scene that his fathers offer his fingers to him so that he could hold it too. Soon Eun-ha realizes that this is not just a flashback, he is reliving his life from the moment he was born. He still thinks all of this is impossible, but this is the best reasoning he could come up with. He thinks it is because of Lee Yu-joing's miracle to save him, as she was able to revive 12 sovereigns. While back in his childhood, his parents cannot stop wondering how cute little Eun-ha is. Eun-ha looks at his parents as he is able to meet them again, which he never thought would be possible, since they were lived during a monster's attack when he was 6. From this moment, he hated monsters. But now as he is reborn, he has another chance to relive his life. This time, baby Eun-ha swears to change the world. While making a promise like this, he makes a fist. His parent standing beside thinks about it as a special moment and decides to capture it. The little baby Eun-ha in his cute outfit with an angry expression. Though he has memories of his previous life. As he is still a year-old baby, he is not able to do anything except eat, sleep, and relax. He is still able to roll over, which he considers as being productive. His sister Beak, watching him, gets excited to see her younger brother. His sister is 4 years older than him. Eun-ha has vague memories of his time with his sister as compared to his parents. But there is one thing he cannot forget about his sister, that is his sister vowing to protect him at all cost. These words were said by her sister when his family was assassinated and his sister hugged him. Back in reality, as he flips over, his sister picks him up and gives her some love for being a good boy. He thinks his sister is obsessed about him. Fast forward to the when Eun-ha turns 9 months old. Mana has changed its form and is melted around him. According to Eun-ha, a small amount of mana exists in the atmosphere. He remembers in his previous life some struggle was because he didn't have much mana in his body. So now he is trying to collect as much mana as he can. His sister caught him chilling alone and asks him what he is doing. Eun-ha looks at his sister and notices that there is a huge amount of mana around his sister. The problem with this much mana around a person at a time is they can get mana concentration disorder, which can be very harmful for their health. But he doesn't want any of that to happen to his sister, so he vows to help him, while his sister holds his hand to help his little brother walk. Fast forward to when Eun-ha is 4 years old. Now he can walk and talk, which gives him more power to be active outside the house. Turns out he is with his sister in a park. It's her sister's part with her friends, and she had brought her little sister along. As they arrive, they are greeted by her friends. His older sister was very popular, so she had quite a fan base there. But on the other hand, him was not popular among his neighbors. His friend Minji spots him and tells him he didn't have to come, but he tells him he was forced to be here. Minji hates being called fat, so she tells him not to call her that she likes to be called from her real name Kim Minji. But Eun-ha continues to tease her, as according to her, she eats a lot all the time. While in the kids' play party, one of his sister's friend recommends that they play a game of cops and robbers, as they have many players for this game. As Eun-ha is living his life for the second time, he finds this childish as according to him, he at 32 plus 4 years old. His thoughts are interrupted by his sister, who is very excited to teach him how to play this game. Eun-ha is okay with the idea of reliving everything as he gets to be with his family. After playing for a long time, before sun sets, both siblings heads home. Eun-ha tells him he is all covered in dirt, but his sister laughs at his innocent sentence. His sister directs his attention towards the time they got to spend together as it was fun, but according to Eun-ha it was okay. The innocent siblings had their early encounter with a giant furious monster that looks like a stray dog. To protect his little brother, his sister steps in front of him. As she herself is terrified of the giant stray dog, she hugs her brother tightly and tells him she will always protect him. Hearing those words, Eun-ha couldn't stop himself, so he places his hand on his sister's shoulder and steps ahead because in his last night, he was not able to do anything except hugging his elder sister. This time it is different as he has more knowledge and experience with him. He steps ahead of his terrified sister as she swears to protect him. With a huge mana erupting from him, the stray dog continues to bark. As soon as Eun-ha tells him to get lost, the poor stray dog runs for his life. His sister is confused yet relieved, but Eun-ha reassures her as now with all he has gone through, he is strong. So she asks him if the blue aura that he emitted was mana. Excited, she asks him to teach these cool stuff. Eunha thinks his sister should be emotional as moment like these, but she is really excited as she continues to ask him to teach her. Tired, Eunha agrees to teach her as he was going to teach her sooner or later. His sister is really happy after listening to his response. Eunha reminds her that they should head home before it gets late. At that moment, Eunha knew he would do everything to protect this innocent smile. Eunha knows he has to stop the incident that led to massacre of his family at all cost. In his previous time when the massacre happened, he was only 6 years old, and he is more than ready to do everything to stop the same events to take place. Back at home, his sister practices using mana on a spinning top under Eunha's supervision. When the spinning top falls to the side, Eunha interrupts and explains to her again that she has to apply the same force in the direction to maintain the balance. His sister thinks all of this is very hard, but Eunha finds it strange, as she was born with this gift but her sense of using it is bad. Eunha passes a side smile on his thought. His sister tells him to be patient with her, as she will learn to spin it correctly soon. With determination, she tries again, but instead of spinning it perfectly, the spinning top hits the wall. All Eunha could think is her sister is going to take a lot of time to master it. A year has passes, and Eunha has turned 5. Eunha is having a nice time with his family watching a award show. To initiate a conversation, his mother shows her excitement towards him turning 6 next year, as he will be old enough to go to kindergarten. Eunha tells his mother that he doesn't want to go, but she tells him that now he doesn't have an option, as he promised her. Eunha is out of options, as he was able to force her mother that he will join kindergarten at the age of 6. Yet still Eunha doesn't want to go among loud and noisy kids. The newscaster catches everyone's attention as they announce only 1 minute is left, and they all should witness this moment together. A newscaster is an airplane above Jeolmyo Shrine. Jeolmyo Shrine is where all the kings and queens of Joseon dynasty are living. Eunha is confused about this being a new chapter in the history of Korea, as according to him, now people know about the existence of mana, and the ones that already have it are busy in practicing how to use it properly. This is a cause of unequal distribution. There could be one other reason for this unequal distribution, i.e. the other half of population has no idea that mana exists and monsters are being created by using mana. Before 1999, an incident happened that caused the destruction of about 30% population in Korea. The people who were able to survive this are those who lived in constant fear that these monsters could return at any moment. Now in 21st century, government laws and policies have lost all the influence. The only thing that is useful and can help people to defeat the monsters is by the use of mana. This has led to a new class of influences among people, as the existing authority in Korea was finished. This new class included people who had power, money, and mana. This new class acted like a rising force. After the attacks was over and stability was restored, it was too late for the society, as everything was damaged. Cities were isolated as the connection between the cities was destroyed, and the isolated cities had no choice other than to wait for monsters who brought nothing except destruction. The destruction was so bad that Korea felt helpless. In the middle of this chaos, a flicker of light appeared on the sky. A celestial being came down from the sky, whose name was Im Jae-yul. Im Jae-yul was a former actress, but she was the first to take control in order to protect Korea. She was gifted with the power of white silver, which means she had the ability to distribute mana. So she quickly started distributing mana. At the altar, the players that are on guard duties are known as 12 sovereigns that will protect Korea when the time comes. Eunha knows all players are united under mana management organization, but the most powerful players operates in shadows. While in history, Im Jae-yul claims to have a rare gift to defeat monsters, though this claim is true. With the national public opinion, she has selected 12 sovereigns. While the 12 sovereigns are players dressed in a black outfit belonging to a clan. All 12 sovereigns claims to be reborn to control the player industry using mana management organization and clan's power. All 12 sovereigns bows in front of her, while she expresses to be excited to work with them. After which she prays to the large aura ball emitting mana. She prays to help her protect the country. Soon a large aura or mana expands over the sky. The news reporter feels cocoon is unraveling. She highlights the fact that maldistribution of mana is undergoing. His sister runs out to the balcony to see herself. She is surprised to see this beautiful, colorful sky. Soon whole family comes out to see the beautiful sky. Eunha praises and thanks the celestial beings for her efforts. Everyone around them is doing the same. His sister asks Eunha to pray with her, but he has no idea whom they are supposed to pray, as he doesn't believe in the existence of God. According to him, God died when the world was on fire. The color of sky has changed completely from a pretty magical blue to a darker blue color, but no one seems to notice that except Eunha. He looks at his mother, realizing there is only one thing he wants to do, which is be happy with his family. So to become a part of his family, he raises his hand to pray. Turns out this is first year of lunar calendar, and Eunha has turned 6 years old. This is a good news, but also this means that the incident when his family became a part of massacre is near. As promised, Eunha starts his kindergarten school from Doha Kindergarten Evergreen Pine class. It's his first day, or kindergarten, and teacher Taeyo announces that Eunha, a new student, will join them. The teacher Taeyo asks him to introduce himself, and while he is doing so, his classmates seems to be occupied with each other. Teacher Taeyo asks him to take a seat, but does point out on him giving such a brief introduction. Eunha doesn't have a motive to make friends with a bunch of kinds, so he stays quiet. Among all students, Minji points him out and asks why would he join her class. Eunha is surprised to see her in the same class as him. Eunha calls her fat Minji in front of everyone from infuriates the poor girl. Teacher Taeyo immediately interrupts between them and asks them nicely to not to interrupt. As this is his first day, Teacher Taeyo gives him the opportunity to play and bond with other children till lunch break so that he may not feel this confused. All the other students notice him and immediately circles him, asking questions like where does he live, or if he wants to play house with him, etc. The teacher was relaxed to see that the children were behavior, so we'll with him. After some time, Eunha manages to go in a hallway thinking he had escaped from the never-ending questions of children and how he hates children. Eunha finds kids' books corner while stramming in the hallway, so he heads in for some quiet time. Also, in order to do something, he decides to pick up a random book so that he may read it.so. He takes a book and find a place to read. There is a cute girl sitting beside him on the same table. Eunha carefully scanned the girl who was studying him, and in his back came a guy who asked what everyone was so interested in those books. The girl turned to the Eunha studying him carefully. To this, the bully simply laughed at the girl, claiming that she has no friends and always sits by herself. In disbelief, the girl was left staring with her mouth agape. The bully then maneuvered over to her and flung her ribbon, asking her why she wore something so disgusting in the first place. The girl desperately explained her dad got it for her, but the bully only went on to ridicule and snatched it away from her. The bully laughed, refusing to give it back, and ran off, taunting her to try and take it. Girlfriend, remember, give one back. That's when tears come. The girl began sobbing and pleaded for the bully to give her the ribbon back. He surprisingly laughed and stuck his tongue out. But then again, Eunha came to the girl's assistance, calling the boy childish all the time while he stuck out his tongue. The bully stared at Eunha, and his face turned paler as he asked him, "What did he just say?" Repeating himself later whilst walking over to the bully, claimed yet again that he was only acting immature. This, however, enraged the bully, who flailed his fist and hurled around threats at Eunha, but Eunha simply sidestepped the punches and turned the bully over. Retrieving the ribbon, Eunha advanced toward the girl and returned it to her, advising her not to give it to anyone again. The dastard, having his blood boiled, yelled after him. Eunha flinched when the 6-year-old made such a chilling comment. The protagonist turned abruptly as the bully ran off, shouting they'd get him next time. The girl grabbed Eunha's sweater, her eyes filling with tears when she realized he had returned her ribbon. Eunha looked at her and, thinking of Catherine and Jimmy, noted they had more mana than most. However, the girl before him seemed to possess an immense amount, far greater than his sisters. Eunha marveled at how she controlled it so skillfully, concentrating it without letting it scatter. He realized such a child could become one of the 12 thrones, or at least their protege. Before his regression, her name had been unknown, yet with such power, she could gain immense fame. Extending his hand, Matthew offered his friendship. The girl blushed, shook his hand, and smiled, thanking him and promising they'd be good friends. Later, bright lights shone over Eunha's house. His mother thanked him for the paper carnation he made in kindergarten, admiring how much it resembled a real flower. She noted he had made 3, one for his sister and one for their grandmother. He remembered making them in his past life and how his grandmother, who raised him after his parents' deaths, had treasured those flowers. In this life, he vowed to show her his gratitude while she was still alive. On March 4th, he learned the government planned to open the Forbidden Road to reunite families in different cities. However, the road was dangerous, and Eunha recalled how his family had died to a monster called the Kren during their journey. Determined to prevent this, he convinced his parents to delay the trip by suggesting an amusement park visit instead. Later, his mother fell ill, something that hadn't happened in his previous life. Realizing his actions were changing the future unpredictably, Eunha decided to let events unfold as they would. However, the Kraken still appeared on the bridge as his family crossed. Chaos erupted as the monster attacked, its massive tentacles smashing vehicles and scattering people. His father suggests that, as their holidays are about to start, they should go to meet their grandma. Eunha feels that he needs to stop this from happening at all cost. His sister confirms again if they are headed to see grandma. She is Eunha's only maternal grandma, as his father was an orphan. She was the one who took care of him when his family was found unalived. It must be difficult for her to take care of such a young child, so both of them ended up with their dry emotions. Despite all what he knows, Eunha cannot say anything and has to act accordingly to his age. His father is excited to be able to see her, because during all the chaos it was very difficult for them to meet her, but now as the government has promised to open up a new road, they will be able to meet her. Finally, Eun-ha speaks up to his parents recommending that they meet her the next year, but his mom reminds him that he had folded carnations to give it to her. Eun-ha replied that he wanted to go, but not on that day, suggesting they reschedule the trip. He clenched his fists, frustrated that his words carried little weight as a child. To avoid raising suspicion, he acted the part and suddenly shouted that Children's Day was coming up, and he wanted to go to the amusement park to ride the Viking. It wasn't far from their house. Anna excitedly raised her hand, saying she wanted to ride it too. Their father smiled, noting that neither Eun-ha nor Anna had ever been to the park. Their mother added it was due to the high monster activity in the area. Their father scratched his head and said they could fix that, deciding they would visit the park tomorrow. Their mother, raising a finger, offered to prepare whatever lunch they wanted. Anna eagerly asked for nuggets and sandwiches. Eun-ha smiled nervously, thinking that while he couldn't stop the Kren directly, he could distract his parents, ensuring they wouldn't face it themselves. This plan could change the future. Eun-ha's thoughts were interrupted when his mother's expression darkened. She asked what was wrong with her own mother, glancing away as she asked Eun-ha to take care of his grandmother. His father, concerned, asked what had happened. His mother admitted her mother had fainted, her voice faltering. Eun-ha gritted his teeth, remembering that in his previous life, his grandmother had been fine until he entered the Players' Academy. His mother, gripping her fists, resolved to visit her immediately. His father, narrowing his eyes, insisted on accompanying her, noting they couldn't go to the park tomorrow. Once road security was prepared, they would leave for her house. Eun-ha's expression darkened, realizing his efforts to change the future had caused unforeseen consequences. The girl, leaning over, assured Eun-ha they could visit the park another time. Eun-ha felt a pang of guilt, realizing his actions had impacted his grandmother's health. If he kept interfering, who knew what else could happen? He couldn't stop the family from encountering the Kren entirely. The world seemed to spin as Eun-ha wondered why he had returned to this moment. Closing his eyes, he thought bitterly that nothing could be truly changed. But as he opened his eyes, Eun-ha reminded himself there was still a difference. This time, he was different. With combat experience from his previous life and years of mana accumulation, he resolved to act, no matter the cost. Eun-ha left his mother and agreed, after which he walked to the window and saw that nothing was to be done. He had to visit his grandmother. Huge tentacles were seen in his mind, and his eyes were now lit bright. He then thought that a Kren stood before him, and that he would fight a monster. The Monster Control Bureau categorized all monsters according to their threat level to world peace. Eun-ha introduced a monster from the dungeon and explained that Class 9 monsters pollute nature or spread diseases, while Class 8 monsters physically threaten everyday life. Class 7 monsters commit robberies or kill, and Class 6 monsters terrorize city districts, either alone or in groups, and break into human territory. Then, Eun-ha presented an enormous insect and added that Class 5 monsters terrorize alone or in teams and have equal powers. Eun-ha recalled people taking cover inside a house and presented a devastated city with monsters. She explained that Class 4 monsters command hordes, which they subjugate or put their lives at risk of loss. Class 3 monsters can threaten the integrity of an entire government. The threat is comparable to that of a natural disaster. Eun-ha introduced the Kren and noted that Class 2 monsters threaten the integrity of an entire government and are equivalent to a catastrophe. He remembered the huge eye and added that Class 1 monsters threaten the existence of all mankind. Eun-ha got on the regiment and thought that Krens belonged to the 3rd class before his regression, but at about the time he entered the academy, Krens were moved to the 4th class because of the high efficiency of players. He remembered how a crowd of warriors fought the Kren and added that, despite this, the players stationed there were only C or E rank. They were too weak to fight the Kren. Eun-ha looked down and thought that, of course, he could not defeat it. There was only one possibility. He imagined a warrior attacking the Kren, who struck it powerfully with fire. Then, Kren caught fire, and Eun-ha noted that he should wait for the 12 thrones to cope. He needs to buy as much time as possible. Eun-ha looked at the table and wondered what kind of weapon a child could have. Scissors, a stationary knife, or maybe a kitchen knife. But his mother would notice if any of them disappeared. Eun-ha poured mana into the knife and noticed that even this weak weapon, if given mana, would be able to cause some damage to the monster. Anna came into the room and asked if Eun-ha was ready. The girl opened the door and said that they were already getting ready. Eun-ha smiled and said he was coming. He then turned around and said that he was ready. There was a huge traffic jam on the road as the family drove in a car. His mother turned and noted that he could sleep as the road was long. Eun-ha smiled and replied that he was fine. The car continued along the road, and Eun-ha looked straight ahead, wondering what would happen when the Kren appeared on the Sanson Bridge, just as they were crossing its middle. But they had run halfway through why they hadn't appeared yet. Unha gazed gloomily out in front and wondered what else could change in the future. Then he asked to let his family cross the bridge. A second later, the middle of the bridge exploded. Unha's mom opened her mouth, and then he felt that this shouldn't change. His father's eyes widened when the car crashed into the edge of the bridge. Unha opened his eyes, grasped his sister, and then clenched his teeth. It was as if the Kren was laughing at his desperate desire to change everything. But now, it was finally here. Unha watched on as the monsters started smashing the cars. Great tentacles smashed their way through stones, debris spraying everywhere, piling up against other cars. People shouted and ran away from the monster. One man shouted to know where everyone is. A warrior held his sword up and bellowed out for people to retreat. He looked up a moment later, stunned, as a huge tentacle struck the ground with all its might. Unha raised his hand, groaning as people started running, shouting in panic. The family stared at the chaos around them. His father trembled and urged them to leave, insisting they needed to stay cautious. He added that if they moved slowly, they could easily escape. Unha glanced at his father nervously. His mother smiled reassuringly, telling them to trust their father. She led them quietly out of the car, reminding them that those players would protect them. As the family stepped out of the car, Anna's eyes opened wide. Unha opened his mouth, staring at his sister, who looked as if she could not stand. She stared at her feet and cried uncontrollably. She told him that she could not move. The father kneeled beside her and told her that he would carry her. He then turned to Unha and asked him if he was fine. Unha nodded and said he could move. A player shouted to move towards the evacuation point, and the family hastened forward. Unha noticed a third-class monster had appeared. Players panicked, but the veterans soon steadied themselves, aiding in evacuating people. Unha concentrated on her work. The Kren wasn't their only issue. They had to get across the bridge. Suddenly, a spear flew towards one of the players and knocked him down. The family gasped as monsters started climbing up the bridge. Unha gritted his teeth, thinking they had already arrived. A diver approached a warrior, pulled out a spear, and roared angrily before leaping at another player. The battle became more intense as players fought back. One of them yelled out for anyone with healing magic, and Jishna hailed, saying she was coming. Then a spear was tossed at her. The warrior cannot help but watch in silence as monsters swarm over his body. The family stepped through the destruction in silence. Unha's father shouted that they have to trust him, that he will protect them no matter what. He then rapidly warns them not to look around and just run. The family ran forward, but at that instant, a giant tentacle caught a vehicle and flung it toward the bridge. Unha looked up and screamed that it was too dangerous. Cars crashed into the crowd. One hit a fuel tank. An explosion followed, and the area shook as the family watched in horror. The explosion shook the ground. Unha's father widened his eyes in shock. A player turned to his comrade, urgently asking where the reinforcements were. The roads were blocked by fire, and they had only been there a few minutes. They needed to hold on until help arrived. Unha thought of all the support from the thrones. He visualized a warrior in his mind and went back to before regression, when the 12 thrones arrived 30 minutes after the Kren. He understood that if evacuation routes were blocked, nobody would be protected. Unha took a good look at the mass of creatures. He knew he could fend off the divers, but the Kren would be another matter. They would all die if there was nothing to stop the creature. He dropped his briefcase and clenched his fists. He knew he was preparing for this from the very beginning. Even at the risk of death, he would protect his family. Unha took out the knife and scissors, studying the blade as he turned around to his parents. "Don't move," he told them, "it's coming." His father challenged what he was doing, so Unha clenched his teeth and then told his father he has to be prepared as the players are keeping back the monsters. He declared, closing his eyes in an attempt to promise Anna was protecting them. Unha smiled, coming to understand that Anna was the other person who could use mana. He turned toward her, asking what she could do. Anna yelled for him, and he bolted towards her, holding out the knife in front of him and preparing himself for what was ahead. He confidently ran towards the Kren, then he charged his legs with mana then. Unha jumped back sharply, quickly leaping across the roofs of cars. His body was engulfed in mana, flames flickering around him. He clenched his teeth and, wide-eyed, realized that the mobility skill he used often before the regression was the first time he had used it in this body. For a child, it was extremely difficult, but he was determined. Furious, he thought that this way, he could reach the Kren instantly. Unha approached the monster, jumping back to land beside the warriors. They turned and shouted at him, warning that it was dangerous. The divers looked at him in horror, but quickly positioned themselves in front of him. Unha swung his knife, wrapping it in mana, and the blade caught fire. He struck the monster, cutting off its head in one swift motion. Standing on the roof, he dodged a diver and quickly stabbed it in the neck, then turned to the second one. In an instant, he cut off its head. Unha then looked up, defending himself against the monster's blow. He fell onto a car, but managed to stop himself, putting the blade in front of him. The divers charged at him, but Unha swung his knife widely, remembering how he used to fight in his past life. He struck, severing the monster's head. Quickly turning around, Unha remembered a movement from his past and sliced off the monster's hand. Taking the knife with both hands, he felt his skills returning. The old feeling of destroying monsters flooded back. Clenching his teeth, he thought to himself that he was becoming immortal again. He recalled his past screams and cut through the monster crowd with a sharp, fluid motion. Unha landed on the ground, dodging another monster before piercing its head. He jumped away from a spear, landing near a car, and cut the monster in two. The knife snapped. Teeth clenched, he realized it hadn't lasted long, but it was time to finish the fight. He discarded the broken knife and took up the scissors, gripping both blades tightly as he charged forward. Abruptly stopping, he locked eyes with the Kren. Taking a battle stance, Unha braced himself for the fight. The Kren swung its tentacle, and he carefully dodged before jumping back, landing on the tentacle. He sprinted along it, leaping back to the monster's face. With one swift motion, he pierced its head with the scissors, rolling and cutting into it. Pulling the blade out, Unha delivered a powerful strike. The Kren swung its tentacle again, but Unha dodged. Landing on the bridge, he looked at the blade, realizing it was useless. He discarded it and lit up brightly, wondering if there was anything else he could use. He dodged another blow from the Kren, running along its tentacle. A new tentacle appeared above him, but Unha jumped down and landed, resting his hand on the ground. He cursed as he realized his mana was nearly gone. Tentacles moved under the bridge, slamming into columns, causing the ground beneath him to crumble. Teeth gritted, he muttered that the monster was very annoying. He moved forward, stepping over broken rocks as purple tentacles rose from the water. Stopping on a rock, Unha watched as a tentacle grabbed a truck, cracking the car. The monster hurled the truck forward, holding the blade in front of him. A blue aura enveloped him as he prepared to strike. With a flash of light, Unha slashed the truck in half, sending parts flying behind him. Flames flared up behind Unha as the glowing blade vanished from his hands. A Kren appeared before him. Unha leaned to the side, his head brushing the ground as smoke billowed behind him. He trembled, realizing he could barely move, and assumed that his mana had run out. He lay on the rubble, knowing that if he lost consciousness now, everything he had fought for would be in vain. The red eye of the Kren stared at him as Unha closed his eyes. A fist slammed the ground nearby. Unha clenched his teeth, determined not to give in. He looked ahead, deciding that he had to keep fighting. Thoughts of his family flashed through his mind, and he realized that he wanted to live. He wanted to keep living this life with them. A tentacle soared into the air, hanging over the child. Unha trembled, but he shouted that he wouldn't die here. Suddenly, human hands reached out to him. His sister appeared by his side, telling the monster not to touch her brother. The children were surrounded by bright, shining lightning. The tentacle began to collapse. The monsters opened their mouths, evaporating upon contact with the glow. A column of light burst forth. Unha stared at his sister, stunned by the impossible sight. This was truly her miracle. A notification appeared, stating that a miracle was a gift capable of changing the world, and its loss. Unha remembered 3 girls and a man in a black helmet. He realized that, before the regression, he only knew 4 people who had such a gift, one of them being his partner, Sarah. Then, he recalled a girl surrounded by a blue aura. When he first saw Anna's immense mana, he had thought she could really have the gift of a miracle. Unha was enveloped in his sister's hug as she reassured him, saying everything was fine. He looked at his hand and noticed his wounds were healing. A massive monster appeared before them. Unha realized the light surrounding them was protecting them from the Kren. He thought of a girl without limbs, explaining that using a miracle comes with a great cost, and those who wield it must pay a steep price to change the world. Unha turned to his sister and asked if she was okay, if she was in pain. Anna smiled, saying everything was fine, though she admitted she was very tired. Unha held her hand as a glow appeared near her chest. He smiled, thinking that she had barely any mana left, just enough to keep her alive. He suggested that the price for her might be their mother. Gently, Unha set Anna down on the ground. She fell into a peaceful sleep, and he told her to rest. Looking away, he said he would handle the rest himself. The child was enveloped in blue energy. A Kren emerged from the water, its red eyes glowing. Unha grinned and taunted the monster, asking if it was afraid of his sister. The tentacle shot forward, but Unha blocked it with his hand, warning the Kren not to touch her. He spread his arms wide, preparing to attack the tentacles. Tentacles loomed over Unha as he focused on his mana, realizing it was slowly being restored. He thought of his parents and sister, understanding that while he couldn't defeat the Kren, the future had already shifted. His family was still alive. A smile crossed his face as he decided there was nothing to fear anymore. He just needed to hold out until the thrones arrived. Meanwhile, on the road, a man sighed, expressing his frustration. He crossed his legs and complained that the cars weren't even moving. He looked at the driver and asked if he was actually driving or just steering. The driver explained that the roads around Seoul were clogged with traffic everywhere. The red-haired boy closed his eyes, muttering that he was thinking about quitting the 12 Thrones. He had joined a fight alongside strong warriors, not to deal with civilians. The driver nervously laughed. Suddenly, both men widened their eyes. The red-haired boy raised his hand as the driver exclaimed that there was a lot of mana. They both realized it was visible. The boy looked at his hand, hearing a ringing sound. He found a phone in his grip and wondered if he was imagining things. The display showed an incoming call. He asked who it was, and the response came with displeasure. Victor. The boy glanced at the phone, scowling, and asked what class the monster was. He was told it was a third-class Kren. Victor frowned and repeated the words, his eyes flashing red. He asked where the monster was, and the driver turned around in fear, thinking of the chaos the Kren was causing. He imagined the tentacles of the Kren and explained that it was on the Sanjan Bridge. Victor's mouth fell open when he learned they couldn't resolve the situation with so many players involved. They didn't know the extent of the damage yet, but he was certain the chaos could end soon. The driver added that they would pick him up soon. Victor got out of the car, and the driver turned to him, asking what he planned to do. Victor stretched his legs and replied that he would walk, since the traffic would prevent them from getting there. He clicked the lock on the door and pulled out his blade. The driver opened his mouth in shock. The driver remarked that it would take at least 2 hours to reach the destination on foot, but Victor, undeterred, dismissed the claim. With a confident stance, he set his sword over his shoulder, saying it would only take him 30 minutes. As blue energy enveloped him, he pressed his foot firmly on the ground and pushed off with incredible speed. The driver, watching in disbelief, realized that Victor's obsession with fighting was as intense as ever. He had always sought to challenge the strongest opponents, after all. Victor's smile widened as he was reminded of his title, the Lord of the Blade Clan and the Demon of Fire. Half an hour later, a monstrous figure with a fish head emerged, flames bursting from its mouth. Victor dashed past the stalled cars, his eyes fixed on the pillar of light ahead. Realizing it was magic, he knew this meant someone new was present, someone capable of such power. His palms glowed with blue energy as he prepared to face the beast. The kraken swung its tentacle, but Victor swiftly appeared, cutting it down in one motion. Unha, watching, knew it had finally happened. He recognized the fire demon before him, Victor, one of the thrones. The tentacle ignited, and the kraken, enraged, retreated into the water. There was no sign of anyone on the surface. Victor, holding his sword firmly, was reminded of his ability to control fire freely, thanks to his pyrokinetic gift, which was the source of his fearsome reputation. As he surveyed the scene, his gaze landed on Unha and his sister, Anna. He couldn't hide his surprise, noticing that they were just children. Anna was surrounded by blue energy, and Victor observed the flow of mana around her, realizing she had been using magic. But her energy was depleted, and she had lost consciousness, leaving her brother to protect her from the Kraken's assault. Victor, intrigued by their strength, smiled, deciding it would be interesting to see them in action as players. He reassured them that they had no reason to fear him, as he wouldn't harm them, at least not for now. As sweat beaded on Unha's face, Victor swung his blade, his focus sharpening. His only goal was to defeat the Kraken. The children were behind him when he advised Unha. Victor eyed Unha, wondering if he was the immortal everyone had been talking about. Unha remained silent, locking eyes with the fire demon. They stood facing each other, tension thick in the air. Victor smirked and showed no interest in exchanging words, simply wanting to see if Unha lived up to his reputation. He challenged him to a fight, but Unha responded with calm resolve, stating that there was no need for a duel and that Victor should move aside. However, Victor, with his sword casually resting on his shoulder, was intent on testing Unha's strength. He refused to step aside, saying that the boy would have to fight him to pass. Unha closed his eyes, a deep blue aura enveloping him as he prepared himself. He warned Victor that he would regret it. As Victor swung his fiery blade, Unha charged forward, determined to face the challenge. In front of the children, Victor stood tall, his weapon gleaming. Unha, holding on to Anna, reflected on the past, remembering how Victor had always sought to duel him. He imagined himself in armor, recalling the countless battles they'd fought, none of which he had ever won. With each encounter, Victor only grew stronger, and Unha recognized him for what he truly was, a fighter born for battle. Victor, noticing the lack of fear in Unha's eyes, scowled. He taunted the Kraken, questioning whether it was afraid of a small fire. The massive tentacles of the Kraken tore through the columns of the bridge, shaking the ground beneath Unha and the children. Victor gritted his teeth, watching in frustration as the creature destroyed the support structures. The asphalt cracked under their feet as Unha quickly lifted Anna in his arms, ready to move. Victor, realizing that with the children present, the fight would be complicated, glanced around. Suddenly, something struck the blue surface. Columns appeared under the bridge, and Victor smirked, recognizing the arrival of backup. A helicopter appeared overhead, signaling the arrival of help. Grace, one of the 12 thrones, descended with a staff in hand. She scolded Victor for calling her by a nickname, insisting she wasn't old enough for such titles. Sweating, she mentioned that they could have brought him here by helicopter, but questioned why they had to rush to the bridge. Victor, with a finger pointed, explained that he needed to reach Seoul immediately. As Grace spoke, her staff began to glow. She reassured everyone that reinforcements would arrive soon to begin evacuating civilians. But for now, their focus had to be on dealing with the Kraken. Victor, enveloped in blue energy, dismissed her assistance, but Grace firmly told him to accept her buffs, regardless of his objections. Standing with her back to Unha, Grace prepared for what was next. Anna stared as Unha said these children were now under her protection. A blue glow emanated from the girl Grace's face as she nervously responded that she understood. Waves began to ripple across the water's surface, and a crane emerged from beneath, appearing near the side of the bridge. The fire demon surged forward, exclaiming it was finally free. Victor pushed off the asphalt and leapt. Water splashed around as the monster advanced. Flames danced on the surface of the water, and a fiery head emerged. The fire demon was completely consumed by flames as it strode toward the crane. Tentacles surrounded and hovered above him before surging forward. More tentacles began to writhe, and a bright flash illuminated the dark silhouette. Victor smirked and called the monster a weakling. His blade ignited in flames as he vowed death upon the crane. Swinging his sword, fire roared forward, causing a massive explosion that engulfed the crane in flames. Victor rested his sword on his shoulder, standing tall before the burning monster. Unha exclaimed in relief that the crane had finally been defeated. The girl with the staff rushed forward, asking if the children were unharmed. She knelt beside them, reassuring them as she prepared to use healing magic. Sweat beaded on Grace's face as the protagonist held Anna in his arms. Noticing there wasn't a single scratch on the children, Grace suggested it could have been a miracle, imagining that their wounds had somehow been healed. Grace extended her hand, exclaiming in awe at the miracle. But as her hand hovered near the children, Unha's expression darkened, and he warned her not to touch his sister. Sweat broke out on Grace's face as she realized the seriousness of his threat, shocked at how a child could intimidate her like that. They stood facing each other when Grace hesitantly asked who he was. Just then, helicopters appeared overhead. Grace glanced up and mentioned that the rescue team had arrived, suggesting they take the children to the hospital. Unha looked up seriously at the TV screen, which displayed endless lines of cars. A news report detailed the sudden attack by a crane on the Sunjin Bridge at 5 a.m., mentioning the tragic loss of lives. A girl on screen explained that rescue operations were ongoing and the government had commented on the incident. Unha sat silently in front of the TV, his gaze dropping as Anna lay nearby, eyes closed. He remembered the doctor telling them Anna was severely exhausted due to depleted mana but would recover after taking a mana potion. His mind replayed images of his family's lifeless bodies from his past life. However, a smile crossed his face as he realized that this time, no one had died. Placing his palm on Anna's forehead, Unha felt relief, thinking he had successfully changed the future. His thoughts were interrupted when someone called his name. He turned to see his parents running toward him, their faces tired and grim. Unha broke into a nervous sweat, realizing he might be in trouble. Standing before his parents, he hesitated as his mother, Tracy, asked if he was hurt. Avoiding eye contact, he reassured them he was fine and pointed to Anna, explaining she was just low on mana but recovering after the potion. His father, John, placed a hand on his head, exhaling deeply before sternly asking why Unha had disobeyed him and run off. Unha lowered his head and apologized, though part of him felt conflicted. Despite the scolding, he was relieved his family had survived, which he considered the best outcome. Yet, as he looked at his parents' worried faces, he realized they weren't angry about the outcome. They were terrified because he had risked his life. Understanding their pain, Unha admitted to himself that he acted without considering their feelings. Tears welled up in his eyes as he apologized again, promising never to act recklessly like that again. His mother smiled, opening her arms, and Unha ran to her, sobbing as his parents embraced him. John held them tightly, pleading with him not to do something so dangerous again. Through his tears, Unha agreed, resolving to leave the battles behind and live like a normal child, just as his parents wished for him. The next morning, sunlight illuminated the hospital as John announced they were preparing to discharge Anna. He told Unha to wait while they handled the paperwork. Unha agreed, sitting near Anna's bed as she slept peacefully. He popped something into his mouth and blushed, realizing it was delicious. Turning, he asked for more, realizing his craving for sweets was due to the energy he had spent during the bridge incident. Victor, the red-haired fire demon, sat beside him and handed him a cookie. Sweat formed on Eunha's face as Victor teasingly asked if he disliked chocolate cookies. Eunha ate the treat in silence, side-eyeing Victor, thinking he might be losing his mind. Then he remembered Victor was already crazy. Victor smiled and asked for Eunha's age. When Eunha replied that he was 6, Victor crossed his arms, noting how young he was before asking about Anna's age. Upon hearing she was 10, Victor casually inquired about her name. Suspicious, Eunha hesitated but eventually gave his own name instead. Victor smirked and suggested Eunha join the academy, offering to give him a recommendation. Eunha briefly imagined growing up under Victor's mentorship, realizing the fire demon probably wanted to raise him as a future rival. The thought made him shudder. Victor stood, saying Eunha had time to think about it, and added that he would remember his name. Outside the room, Grace observed the interaction, commenting on the rarity of such a miracle in Korea. Victor brushed off her remarks, stating the only thing that mattered was strength. Grace sighed, calling him a battle-obsessed fool. Victor retorted, reminding her of his seniority and advising her to mind her tone as a member of the 12 Thrones. Eunha watched him go, silently wondering about the fire demon's eccentric nature. The girl stood amidst the crowd and remarked that if this miracle was as rare as she claimed, the child would be overwhelmed by the world's attention as soon as it was revealed, and life would never return to normal. Grace clenched her fist as Victor questioned if that was truly what she wanted. Eunha glanced back and told Grace that if she understood the consequences, she should let it go. He then casually suggested they. The car came to a stop near the house as Eunha's family arrived to visit their grandmother the day after the Kren attack. His parents got out of the car, and John asked why the grandmother wasn't in the house. Tracy replied that she wasn't feeling well. The grandmother, smiling warmly, explained that she missed them so much that she decided to meet them outside. She said she wanted to see her grandchildren and noted that they looked tired. The children were asleep in the car. The grandmother mentioned that they should rest. Eunha stirred slightly, noticing Anna lying against him. He sat up carefully, wondering if she was comfortable sleeping like that. His parents were also asleep nearby. Eunha smiled, assuming Anna inherited that ability to sleep anywhere from their mother. He gently covered his sister with a blanket before leaving the room. Outside near the house, Eunha sat quietly, his hand glowing faintly with blue energy. He realized his mana had increased and suspected it was due to his gift. Memories of the guy with the sword surfaced, and he reflected on how his gift, Berserker, worked in his previous life, gaining energy the more it was used. He imagined a figure with glowing red eyes and remembered how using mana extensively would eventually drive him mad. Yet this time, after cutting through the truck, his mind felt fine. If there was no cost to this ability now, it was truly the best gift. Clenching his fist, Eunha wondered if there was still more he didn't know about Berserkers. His grandmother approached him, surprising him with her silent presence. She asked why he wasn't asleep yet. Embarrassed, Eunha scratched the back of his head, explaining that he had napped in the car. Smiling, she draped her sweater over him, saying that to grow up, he needed plenty of rest. Eunha recalled times when his grandmother always seemed to be there whenever he was lost in thought. He gazed at the gray-haired woman, sensing that she was waiting for him to open up, whether it was about problems, feelings, or anything at all. Finally, he asked why she wasn't sleeping. She smiled and replied that it was because her grandson wasn't asleep. Eunha chuckled nervously, realizing how much he appreciated these moments with her, not just as a child but now, with newfound clarity. When his grandmother asked if he wanted warm milk, Eunha raised his hands, declining. Tracy joined them, questioning if he really didn't want it. Eunha was startled, wondering when his mother had arrived. Tracy pointed to the milk and asked who would drink it. Eunha took the mug, raising it to his face. As they sat outside, Tracy brought up her concern about the phone call, saying how worried she'd been when told her mother had fainted. The grandmother brushed it off, explaining that the neighbor had exaggerated. Tracy pressed further, but her grandmother revealed she had been distracted when she thought she saw someone on the stairs. The grandmother recounted seeing a dark figure at the top of the stairs, waving its arms and warning her not to go up. She looked at Eunha and realized it might have been him rather than her imagination. Eunha touched his chin thoughtfully, recalling the tentacled monster and deciding it would be strange to dismiss it as a mere fantasy. He imagined his frightened family and concluded that if anything had gone wrong, they all could have died, just like his grandfather. Sweat beaded on his forehead as Eunha realized she should have told them sooner if it was truly him. Clouds drifted across the sky as the grandmother fondly recalled how her late husband once mentioned seeing a cute deer outside, which had reminded her of Eunha. Tracy added that she'd had a similar dream about her father leaving a deer behind. As the women reminisced, they asked Eunha what he wanted to be when he grew up. Unha lowered his mug, ready to answer, when a dark aura loomed behind him. Creatures with glowing red eyes appeared, their voices calling for help. He froze, sweating, until his mother touched his shoulder and asked if he was okay. Forcing a smile, Unha assured her that he was fine, but still unsure of what he wanted to be. His mother told him it was fine not to know yet. His grandmother smiled and encouraged him not to rush. She advised him to live through happy and challenging times, make friends, quarrel, study, and play, eventually discovering what he truly loved. Unha smiled awkwardly, realizing her simple advice was to live a happy life. Tracy hugged him, agreeing with the grandmother's words. She reassured Unha that time was on his side and that he could overcome anything. Blushing, Unha listened as his mother explained that his name meant universe with infinite power and that she would always be proud of him. His grandmother chimed in, saying she would always support him too. Anna joined them, asking for milk. She sat beside them, and Tracy teased her for being awake already. Their grandmother handed her a glass, and Unha smiled softly. He then presented a small bouquet of flowers to his grandmother. Everyone beamed as she thanked him, saying she would display them on the hallway nightstand for everyone to see. Unha thought to himself that placing them by the entrance meant she wanted to show them off, even if she didn't realize it. Watching her hold the flowers, Unha resolved to give her more cherished memories in this life. He thanked her grandma for raising them until now with a pure smile on his face. Voices filled the house as Unha's parents announced, smiling, that they were expecting an addition to the family. Unha and Anna stared at their mom and dad in surprise. Anna ran up to their father, excitedly asking if she would have another brother. Their mother, Tracy, looked at Unha with curiosity, while Tracy hugged her son's shoulders. With tears in his eyes, Unha thanked his parents, saying this was the best thing that had ever happened to him since his own birth. John, with a grin, teased that Unha's reaction might make others think he was the father. The family shared a hearty laugh while sitting together at the table. Later, while playing at kindergarten, a little girl ran up to Unha, asking if he had missed her. Playfully, Unha pretended to bark like a dog, making the kids giggle. 3 children patted his head, comforting him, as he looked away, annoyed. Catherine, holding a mug, remarked sarcastically about why everyone thought the dog was cute. She smirked, suggesting that it might be better to get rid of him. Unha growled in response, only for Catherine to threaten to tell the teacher, smirking at his quick shift to feigned innocence. As Unha pretended to sleep, one of the kids decided to playfully trap him in a makeshift animal cage. Time passed, and soon, a man entered the children's room. A girl ran to her father, smiling happily that he was home, while Unha walked through the hallway, glancing around. At the table, he noticed a girl reading a book and curiously asked what it was. She replied, "Sherlock Holmes?" Absent-mindedly, Unha commented that Sherlock and the professor fall off a waterfall and die. The girl froze in shock, looking at him incredulously. Realizing his mistake, Unha grinned awkwardly, apologizing for accidentally spoiling the story. When he tried to reassure her that Sherlock comes back later, the girl looked even more upset. Flustered, Unha quickly left, apologizing over his shoulder. As Unha wandered through the kindergarten, he noticed groups of children crowding around. They seemed to be engaged in small arguments and fights. One child caught Unha's eye, challenging him to prove who was the strongest in their group. With an exaggerated grin, a boy drew a toy sword, pointing it at Unha. "This city's too small for the both of us," he declared dramatically, prompting cheers from the other kids. The crowd urged them to fight, and the boy charged at Unha with his plastic weapon. Calmly, Unha met his attack, deflecting the sword. Catherine, watching from the sidelines, shouted at Unha to give up and declared that he should lose. Her disapproving glare didn't faze him, though. Another girl, Olivia, with tears in her eyes, shouted angrily that she hated him. Unha, keeping his composure, muttered under his breath that he didn't need anyone's support anyway. The duel intensified, and the other boy attempted to grab his sword after losing his footing. Unha, moving swiftly, countered and struck the boy's toy sword aside. The defeated challenger dropped to his knees, clutching his side as if truly wounded. "It's not over. I could still use my secret power," the boy shouted dramatically before collapsing. The children erupted into applause, surrounding Unha and praising his skill. Someone mentioned that only Unha could pull the legendary sword, Excalibur, from a pile of old toys. Grinning, Unha confidently took hold of the toy sword, lifting it high above his head. The children cheered wildly, clapping and chanting his name. Their excitement was interrupted by the distant sound of sirens. News on a broken smartphone nearby revealed that 7th-grade goblins had been sighted in the city. The reporter warned that while most had been dealt with, 2 goblins remained at large, blending into crowded places. The broadcast urged citizens to report any sightings immediately, as a shadow of unease crept over the otherwise cheerful kindergarten scene. Children were playing a game on the streets. Catherine ran after another girl, while Unha sat near the gate, watching them with a thoughtful expression. He wondered if children ever got tired. Unha made a subtle gesture with his hands, reflecting on how, after altering the future, every second needed to be used wisely to conserve mana. He knew that in time, mana would be recognized as a formidable power, so he resolved to store up as much as possible. After this incident, Unha would be able to gather even more mana. The children, smiling brightly, invited Unha to join their game. He was surprised by their endless energy. Suddenly, a nanny approached, calling out for everyone to attack the ice cream. The children cheered and rushed over, eagerly picking their favorite flavors. Unha stood to the side, observing with a faint smile and remarking to himself how they were still such kids. The nanny noticed the others and encouraged them to grab some as well. Two hands simultaneously reached for one ice cream, Unha and Catherine's. Both held onto the package tightly. Unha, irritated, told Catherine to let go because it was his, but she refused. The nanny watched their squabble with concern before intervening. With a smile, the teacher broke the ice cream into 2 pieces and handed them each half, reminding them to share and not to fight. Later, Unha and Catherine began a playful contest to see who would win it all. The teacher disapprovingly stopped them, insisting they share. Olivia looked at the teacher in surprise and asked where Jimmy was. With a candy bar in her mouth, Catherine casually replied that he was probably in the garden, busy with his sword. Olivia, puzzled, asked why Jimmy always played by himself. Unha, standing apart from the group, mentioned that Jimmy was likely doing some secret training. Catherine curiously asked Olivia why she wanted to bring Jimmy ice cream. Olivia, smiling, said she felt sad that Jimmy was alone while everyone else was together. Catherine teasingly told her that being too kind was her biggest flaw. The teacher offered Olivia the ice cream and asked if she wanted to deliver it to Jimmy. When Catherine asked if she'd go along, Olivia replied she would go alone. Unha sat on a nearby pipe, watching Olivia run off. His gaze turned melancholic as he stared into the distance. Moments later, he heard the children being called to play freeze tag. Catherine passed by and told Unha to join, but he declined, saying he'd had enough for the day. Catherine frowned and retorted that no one would play with him if he kept isolating himself. Unha shrugged her off, telling her not to worry. She scoffed and mentioned that Anna had told her to play with him, prompting a faint smile as Unha thought of his sister. As the children played rock, paper, scissors to determine the tagger, Unha watched them scatter with mild displeasure. Eventually, he joined the game, chasing after Catherine. When he tagged her, she glared at him and told him to freeze. Unha quickly darted off again, tagging someone else, and the game continued with laughter and shouting. Just as everyone was enjoying themselves, Unha noticed something strange. A massive shadow loomed nearby. His smile faded as he froze in place, staring at the source of the shadow. The terrifying form of a 7th-grade goblin stood near the kindergarten, its sharp axe gleaming menacingly. The children, confused and frightened, began to notice the monster. The goblin's eyes landed on a little girl, who stood paralyzed with fear. Slowly, it extended its clawed hand toward her. With a roar, it swung its axe down at the terrified child.